Good evening. My name is Michelle December, and I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Contemporary Art Museum. And we are co-presenting the event this evening with the Cahokia and Mounds State Historic Site. I always really love when we have a chance as a contemporary space to think about these connections across time. And of course, when we had this exhibition, this installation by Haegue Yang, which we'll hear about shortly, that was inspired by the Mounds, we only had one option, and that is the format of tonight. So I'd like to first acknowledge the format and the incredible people that are giving shape to tonight's gathering. We're convened by Misa Jeffereis, CAM's Associate Curator, and Dr. Angela Cooper, who is Site Services Specialist at Cahokia and Mounds. They've assembled a conversation to explore why the Mounds continue to resonate with artists and cultural stewards so much still to this day. As part of our planning, Dr. Cooper had the really great idea to ensure that there is a connection with Indigenous artists and cultural stewards whose relationship with these surrounding lands and waters predate and transcend colonial borders. Where we sit, the Cahokia site is a short 20-minute drive away. As we'll hear more about, it is the largest and most complex urban settlement of the Mississippian culture. And although it was dormant by the 1300s, I hope I got that right, the Mississippians dispersed and became ancestors to various Native American tribes. Where we sit is the ancestral homes of the Osage Nation, Otoe, Missouri, Illinois Confederacy, Quapaw, Ho-Chunk, Miami, and other tribes. Their sovereignty was never ceded, even if U.S. forces and treaties brought violence and total displacement, to the extent that there are no federally recognized tribes in present-day Missouri. But where we sit is home to many Indigenous people, even if their ancestors called another land home, and our intention is to connect with both artists and cultural stewards who personally or in recent generations moved to St. Louis, as well as for whom this is their ancestral homeland. And so for tonight, we welcome 4 program contributors who are joining us, and I hope you had time to visit them and have a conversation. There'll also be time at the end of our program to do so. And so I'd like to just start with a little bit of recognition for who's joining us today. Shout out to Dr. Cooper for setting up a really lovely display about Cahokia and Mounds. I also would like to recognize Kassie Kussman. Kassie is a Cherokee metalsmith and artist based in St. Louis. Her work bridges Southeastern designs with contemporary form. Through her studio, Mean Right Hook, which is such a great name, she transforms copper and silver into modern interpretations of ancestral patterns and symbols. Just next to Kassie, we have Veronica Pipestem, who traveled from Oklahoma to be with us today. She is an enrolled citizen of the Otoe, Missouri tribe, an Osage head right holder, and is of citizen and prairie band Potawatomi descent. Veronica owns Itsimibi. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce it. Did I do okay? More or less. I am going to snatch up anything that's left by the end of the time here, and she's brought some really beautiful pieces that she's made and family members have made. And Veronica is many things that I could not list all right now, but among the many hats that Veronica wears, she is a cultural and natural resources. Itsimibi is a cultural and natural resources firm that specializes in contract grant writing and developing practical solutions for small and medium-sized museums, thank you, cultural centers, and archives. Next to Veronica is Rico Rose. Rico is an Indigenous community member of St. Louis and a horticulturalist specializing in native plants and sustainable landscaping. They are providing information about Cohorts of Sorts, a collaborative, community-centered project focusing on sharing resources, building connections, and supporting place-based environmental and cultural work. And last but definitely not least, we have Lydia Cheshewalla, who we were joking, is here to give out advice or, will give you coaching and support if you need to weather the storms that we are weathering. And Lydia is an Osage ephemeral artist from Oklahoma who also came up to join us tonight. Lydia is living and working in motion throughout the Great Plains ecoregion. Through the creation of site-specific land art and ephemeral installations grounded in Indigenous land stewardship practices and kinship pedagogies, Lydia engages in multivocal conversations about place and relationship. So I want to first start by saying thank you very much for being here, the 4 of you, to extend the creativity and the energy. And so again, you'll have a chance to engage and interact at the end of our conversation if you haven't yet. I want to just point out a couple of other elements of our program. We have kind of 2 guiding questions that there's room to put if you would like to participate in the conversation, but maybe not speak. There's a Post-it note area where you can answer one of our 2 questions, which of course I forgot to write down what they are, but if my memory serves me, it's really asking tonight, why are the Mounds so resonant to today? And How does being with the Mounds help us be part of the bigger picture? So those are the questions that we will hear a little bit more from Misa and Dr. Cooper. I'd also like to, of course, introduce the two of them because they're really the reason that we're able to gather today. Dr. Angela Cooper is the Site Services Specialist at Cahokia and Mound State Historic Site. She is an alumna of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and the University of Tulsa. Dr. Cooper enjoys educating visitors about Cahokia Mounds and its people. Misa Jeffereis is Associate Curator at Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis, where she recently organized Haegue Yang Quasi-Heartland, amongst many other exhibitions. Misa holds a Master's in Art History from Hunter College in New York, and I'd like to start by passing it over to Misa. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on this chilly evening. Thank you to Michelle for that lovely introduction and getting some laughs in. Love that. And also for being such a great thought partner and collaborator on this program. An immense thank you to Dr. Cooper for the willingness to be in conversation with me and to share your knowledge and understanding of Cahokia with our audience tonight. And lastly, of course, thank you to our guest contributors who have traveled from near and far to join on this occasion. And we are so thrilled to be able to both learn about each of your practices and perspectives, and also to see your wonderful creations that you brought with you. As Michelle said, we are here on the occasion of our current exhibition by Haegue Yang, and specifically to talk about the artwork that she created for her show, which was inspired by Cahokia Mounds. I'll start off by giving some context to Haegue's artwork called Mound Vehicles, and then I'll invite Dr. Cooper to share a presentation on Cahokia and its historical, ecological, and cultural significance. Then we'll open up a conversation about why Cahokia continues to inspire so many generations of creatives and how the mounds help connect us to the larger picture, something greater than ourselves. After the conversation portion of the program, Michelle will help moderate the Q&A section where we invite you all to share your thoughts and questions. Okay, so on to Haegue Yang. I love this photo of her. She's an artist based between Korea and Germany, and here she's pictured in one of her installations listening to the sound of a rock. She characterizes herself primarily as a sculptor, and she's known for her skill in working across many different types of mediums and materials and combining ready-made materials with handmade craft works. She makes room-scaled installations and performative sculptures, and she also makes paper collages and staged performances. She's very interested in folk culture, mythology, rituals, and religion, and she combines these elements from multiple cultures into sculptures that reflect cultural hybridity. So in pieces like these woven works that we see on the right and left of the screen, she references the Japanese and Korean custom of wrapping trees with straw in the winter to protect them. She's particularly interested in traditional and ancient weaving techniques practiced by agrarian societies. And the sculptures that we see just behind those in the front are adorned with bells, pointing to how different cultures use bells in their rituals. Along those lines, she has a series of works called Mesmerizing Mesh, seen here, which is loosely inspired by ritual paper props made of hanji, which is Korean mulberry paper. Hanji is used in purifying, healing, exercising, and cleansing rites, and that hanji paper can be seen in her kite works on view at the museum. Haegue, though, is best known for her Venetian blind installations, such as this earlier work, often installed hanging from the ceiling with other sensory elements, such as lights and sounds, to create an immersive experience. She's drawn to using blinds as her material because blinds evoke a sense of the home, but also of boundaries, demarcations, and separations, especially of intimate or private space from public space. In 2010, Haegue began making what she calls dress vehicles, where she builds a vehicle structure that can be worn and performed with and mobilized, since they have handles and casters, as you can see in this image. Here's another example. And then that leads us to our piece, Mound Vehicles. And this work continues Haegue's dress vehicle series. The work was inspired by a visit that Haegue took to Cahokia about a year and a half before her show here. And she's long had an interest in ancient civilizations and their customs and traditions. Her artistic practice takes a transnational approach, and it's based on respect for other civilizations and their traditions. Mound Vehicles takes the shape of a mound in 4 parts or quadrants. The green blinds are associated with the grass that covers the mounds at Cahokia, and the blue blinds refer to the Mississippi and Missouri rivers as well as subterranean water. Each part is actually slightly different in its coloration and design, and they're outfitted with these brown branch-like handlebars and casters, and the sculpture is designed to be activated and moved, bringing the work to life. In fact, the activation is as important as the sculpture itself, really inseparable in Haegue's mind. The movement is what brings us a kind of holistic understanding of the sculpture. Haegue and I worked on the choreography together to activate Mound Vehicles, and it was a great privilege and also challenge to work on something I've never done before like that. But the idea was to emphasize its modularity, that it can be kind of continuously rearranged into new forms. It also continues her fascination with the many dimensions of movement, from physical movement, emotional movement, socio-political movement. So for example, in other of her works, she's looked at ideas around immigration, forced migration, self-exile, or political exile. And as you'll see in the movement of our talented facilitators, actually popped ahead a little bit, the choreography, in a way, conveys a sense of pilgrimage and procession based on events that might have taken place at Cahokia. And it also prompts us to think about the cardinal directions and our orientation in space. And so before I begin this video of the activation, I wanted to mention just one more component as part of the activation of the sculpture. So there's music that accompanies the activation, and it's something that Haegue chose. It's a piece from 1967 by a Korean avant-garde composer named Issang Yoon. And for this musical piece, Yoon was coincidentally inspired by Mounds, in this case, the great tomb of Kongso near Pyongyang from the 6th to 7th century. And on the walls inside those Korean mounds, as you can see here in this drawing, are paintings. There are 4 guardian gods that are depicted as a turtle, dragon, phoenix, and tiger. And Issang Yoon, essentially what he did was he translated those images into sound. So each of the animals has a particular instrument assigned to it. And so the piece was really meant to have you kind of create an image in your mind as you're watching. So with that, I'm going to play about 4 minutes or so of the activation. It's about 12 minutes normally, but to give you a sense of what that looks like. Okay, I think I'll stop it there, but you got the idea. So it's kind of slow, like a pilgrimage or procession, and then it gets to this more, like we call it the chaos moment, where there's like this release that happens. So I wanted to make sure you saw that. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Cooper.
Okay,
Thank
you. I want to give a little background too about myself. When I was asked to participate, I was very intrigued because I saw a Korean name, Yang Haegue, and I'm Korean. As you saw, Korean people also build mounds. But the first mounds I learned about were Cahokia mounds. And I fell in love with the site, fell in love about learning about these people and who they were, or who I could imagine who they were, met really wonderful people who are descendants of them. And then I was also excited that there was another Korean person who loved Mississippian mounds. And so I came out and I did get to meet Haegue, and that was just really fun for me. As my friend said, very niche population. So I'll start my presentation. It's going to be very brief, comprehensive overview about the site to understand the significance of Cahokia Mound's archaeological site. In the slide is a picture of the American Bottom, so we can orient ourselves in St. Louis to where Cahokia is today and where it was. Since time immemorial, Native Americans have occupied the Americas. In the American Bottom, where we are currently located, archaeologists have found evidence of people living here since 10,000 BC. Gradually, people started becoming more sedentary. They're cultivating and domesticating plants. At Cahokia Mound specifically, there's evidence of people living at the site starting about AD 700 during the late woodland period. And then we start seeing some interesting culture change happening from the late woodland getting into Mississippian. So these are terms that archaeologists use to describe things. We don't know what the ancestors called themselves. So a couple of our contributors are very knowledgeable on horticulture, native plants, and things like that. So I wanted a slide too to talk about what the Mississippians were growing and kind of what brought them or maybe encouraged them to stay in the site. American Bottom is a very fertile floodplain. I'm going to go back. You can see where the Mississippi River moved about the landscape for millennia and left behind a lot of oxbows wetlands. And so that was a great natural resource that probably encouraged people to stay. And around AD 950, people are now living at that site at Cahokia Mounds permanently year-round, and they've now brought in maize or corn, as well as having already domesticated squash and sunflower, and then also cultivating those native plants up on the screen. And there's more. And we talked about Misa brought up the position in the landscape, mentioned like cardinal directions. The number 4, I've been told, is a sacred number, important. And we see that in this aerial picture. There's 5 plazas, but there is 4. During time, the Mississippians had to move things over, but they maintained the major 4 plazas around Monk's Mound, which is the largest pre-contact human-made earthwork in the Americas. But around the same time as that maze is coming in, people are settling permanently. The residents start planning the city, and they're heavily modifying the landscape. So those plazas are flattened and raised, slightly raised land. So they're moving a lot of earth to make it in the way that they want it to. And in the other picture, we see that it's aligned on the cardinal directions. Today, it's offset 5 degrees east of north. But I think at the time that they were doing it, it was their true north. See. So plazas are ceremonial and communal spaces. And they start also putting small neighborhoods around the plazas and then gradually building mounds. And around AD 1050, that's when the monumental construction and population size exponentially increases. And so there's estimates that at that time, there's about 10 to 20,000 people. And then, let's see. Based on oral histories and shared extant symbols and iconography on artifacts, which we can see with our lovely artists, we know that there's 4 major language families were spoken at Cahokia Mounds: Algonquian, Caddoan, Muskogean, and Siouan. And so that indicates that many, many people moved there, visited that place, and so that is why it contributes to that large population. There's something about Cahokia that brought all these people here. Let's see. And then, so this is Mississippian and Related Cultures by Herb Rowe, showing the different variations of Mississippian, and then an image of a ceramic that was found at Cahokia Mounds with a cross and circle imagery, and we see that a lot throughout the Mississippian world and in descendant art. And then the other picture is a Library of Congress map of Native American language and language families. Okay. So Cahokia Mounds archaeological site is the largest archaeological site north of Mexico in terms of size and population. The original site encompassed 6 square miles or 4,000 acres and had 120 mounds. Today, the state of Illinois protects, preserves, and owns 2,300 of the original 4,000 acres and 72 of the remaining 80 mounds. So through time, historically, many of the mounds were destroyed or plowed over through agriculture. People occupied the site from that earliest time permanently, AD 700 to about AD 1350. And although the site is called Cahokia Mounds, we don't know what they called themselves. And so for this reason, archaeologists call them Mississippians, and it also has to do with it being on the Mississippi River. And then also in this other map, we see an overlay of Mississippian sites on the Mississippi watershed. So that connection, and it's not just, relegated to those people. People are visiting from all over. Let's see. So okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. And then this is a mural by L.K. Townsend that we have at Cahokia Mounds in our interpretive center. And I know you all are thinking, when are you going to reopen? We're hoping for a late spring. Keep an eye on our Facebook and website. But we give free guided walking tours, so make a reservation. I'm happy to meet with you and give you some more information. You just got to call. And so in the mural, we see some of the more, quote, exotic goods that were brought from all these different places that people are at. So we see marine shell coming from the Atlantic and Gulf. We see back in the back, I just noticed them like 2 days ago. These guys looking at copper plates. I wish I had a laser pointer. So again, we're bringing in that copper. Cassie's got that copper, right? And we see some items that people also traded that were local to here. We see in the lower corner, people looking at some Mill Creek chert hose. And we found those at other Mississippian sites. So there's an exchange happening, possibly, outside the city, within the city. And then here's some more trade items. And so the things coming out, or coming into the area: copper from the Great Lakes, marine shelf from the coast, mica from the Smoky Mountains, and different types of chert being utilized to make projectile points. Then we have outline of Cahokia style points, the Mill Creek chert hoe, and then the burger figurine, and that's a flint clay type of stone that's found in southeast Missouri. What is interesting is that the female figurines are mostly found in our area, and the male figurines are sent outside of Cahokia Mounds. Just putting that out there. These artifacts and raw materials have been found at Cahokia Mounds, have been found at other places, and we theorize that maybe it happened in the Grand Plaza, which is the largest north of Mexico pre-contact communal space. It's 40 acres. And we have evidence of people feasting, and many descendant groups still utilize plazas for ceremonies, feast, and playing chunky. So that's what I was going to just talk about, where I was saying it's not just that specific Mississippian sites of interaction. One of the artists here in this room, Teresa Baker, she's Mandan, and I showed her this painting, and I was like, hey, this is George Catlin from the 1830s, painted Mandan men playing chunky. And the Mandan are further west. And so showing that connection, and many descendant groups still play chunky. And so that photograph is a Cherokee citizen's chunky stones that he uses to teach Cherokee youth. So north of the Grand Plaza is Monk's Mound, as I said, the largest pre-contact human-made earthwork in the Americas. It is 100 feet tall with a 14-acre base. Archaeological investigations showed the mound originally had 3 terraces, but slumping during the Mississippian period created 4. Today it looks about 2.5 terraces, and that's from that continued slumping over time. At the top of Monk's Mound, excavations revealed the largest wall trench structure found on site, and due to size and scale of the building, we interpret it to be a council house or governmental building. During one of the many 1970s excavations at the site, archaeologists uncovered this really cool sandstone tablet. On one side is cross-hatching and a birdman on the other. The birdman tablet has become a symbol of Cahokia Mounds, as we can see from my work shirt. And if you've driven down north or south on 255, you may have noticed him in the corner. The tablet was probably a significant artifact since it was buried in the largest mound and displays iconography of the cosmology of the Mississippian world. So it shows the relationship, again, based on oral histories of descendant groups, that there's a 3-world system held by a pole. And as we can see in the picture, there's that birdman in the upper world, but also being a man, he can access the middle world. And then the cross-hatching we can think is maybe similar to reptile skin, so something coming from the lower world. And throughout the Mississippian world, we see many artifacts with many of these designs on them. Kassie has a beautiful gorget with what some people might identify as a piasaw, and so that is a supernatural creature from Mississippian time period. Just hanging out up there. This guy. Yeah. Yes. So like mounds and plazas, the remains of poles are found at many Mississippian sites and found associated with those features, with mounds and plazas. To the west of Monk's Mound, Mississippians constructed a series of posts in a circle over a 100-year time period. Beginning around AD 1000, a 240-foot in diameter circle was erected using red cedar posts. And each time they rebuilt the circle, they added 12 more posts, although the fifth time was only 13 posts in the sunrise arc. We call this structure Woodhenge because we can see that the Mississippians used it as a solar calendar similar to Stonehenge. This was probably a significance of the placement of this calendar. As we can see in the photograph, it's from a fall equinox showing the sun looks like it's coming out of Monk's Mound. So again, the most important, biggest mound on site. Although we can determine the solar association with Woodhenge, they probably had the calendar for other significant cosmological upper world events. And then a diaspora is a population that is scattered across regions which are separate from its geographic place of origin. So there's probably a diaspora happening while there's this decline. And around AD 1200, we see the monumental construction and population decreases. And by AD 1350, the site has been abandoned. People are no longer living there year-round permanently or doing any ceremonies. We don't know for certain why people left, probably a variety of factors, including climate change, societal unrest, things like that. Maybe they found a new job somewhere else, right? Like, why do we move about the landscape? Think about it in that way. I was in Boston 3 years ago and I moved back home, right? So we don't also know why they chose this space. Why not, why was it on the east side? Why not here where there were mounds as well? Why not East St. Louis, which is also a large mound group? That's a question that I'm going to keep asking. But if anyone has any ideas, that would be really helpful. So perhaps it was the fertility of that land, that Mississippi River coming through, maybe certain cosmological events, which archaeologists theorize, or there's religious, ideological reasons, or maybe all of the above. But all that to say that Cahokia Mounds is a sacred, important, and significant site that we all need to respect and admire. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thanks so much, Dr. Cooper. I'm sure it was difficult to whittle down the whole history and, impact of Cahokia into 10 minutes. So thank you so much. It does make me feel very privileged to be so close to this incredibly significant civilization. So thank you so much for that. I wanted to kind of shift us into the conversation. I am going to come back to a few things that you mentioned, but I want to kind of get us into the topic, the first question that we were going to address, which is, why is Cahokia and why do ancient mounds resonate so much for contemporary creatives and artists? And I thought I would bring in Haegue's voice. I asked her kind of directly, what was it about Cahokia that really spoke to you? And it's a quote that I kind of paraphrased a little bit, but here it is. She said, "As a sculptor, I found it particularly interesting since it's a ground or a plateau, making it not an architecture, but an object. It's a different category." She also said, "Its mysteriousness led or allowed me to celebrate it, even as an outsider." And then thirdly, she said, "It's not only Cahokia, but in general, what you could feel there, the breeze, the view, proximity to sky, nature sounds, etc. the holistic ambiance that comes with Cahokia, and that includes the river. She said, our relationship with water, with an exclamation point. For me, inspiration is something very holistic, and I developed great respect for that place. So I think a lot of that probably resonates for us, for those that have been there. You know, it's like so incredibly impressive to see Monk's Mound, especially like in its entirety. I have this quote of a fact that I kind of wanted to run by you, which is that I listened to it in the Historical Diversions podcast, and they said that Monk's Mound's base is actually bigger than the Pyramid of Giza.
Yes.
I mean, just to put that into perspective, that is kind of mind-blowing.
It's not as tall.
Okay, well, we don't have to, you know.
That's why I didn't put that in there.
But still, that much earth had to move, and it was moved by a human being. So I think there's obviously like this impressiveness in terms of the monumentality and the scale. And of course, the second point being around like the proximity to nature. I wonder if you want to share any reflections that visitors have provided to you. You know, when you've given site visits, obviously, to children and adults. What kind of stands out for people when they first kind of see it for the first time?
I think it's the same as like what Haegue was saying, that there's just this immense feeling. It's there is a historic Highway 40 that cuts through the middle of the site. And so that kind of dampens it. But when you climb the top of Monk's Mound, it kind of all just melts away, because just looking, you can see for miles when it's like a clear day. And I know that visitors are always wowed by it. When I try to keep the tour going, they're just like walking off and wanting to look. And I'm like, okay, I'll wait and I'll finish, you know. And for me, it's that constant feeling of like, this is an amazing site. I'm always happy to go to work, and I know that that is a privilege that not many people have. But there's just something about it that is just really calming and awe-inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to bring up, because you had talked about how, you know, there's mound builders all around the world, and we talked about it in Korea in multiple instances. And I just wanted to bring up a couple more examples of artists who are reflecting on mounds that are closer to them. So as we said, Teresa Baker, the piece Lucky Mound, which is just on the other side of this wall, if everyone saw it. It's made of artificial turf, and it's spray painted with yarn and willow. And this mound in particular, it refers to a geologic formation in Montana that has familial ties for the artist. And I think we can maybe imply that Lucky Mound, there's something positive about the mound for Teresa. And so also connecting to, you know, Mound City, which we are. And then secondly, Andrea Carlson, another artist who will be on view next season here, will have this piece called Low Relief Mound. And for Andrea, she is really inspired by Man Mound in Baraboo, Wisconsin, from 750 to 1200 AD. It's an earthwork that's 214 feet in length and 2.5 feet tall. So not super tall, but, you know, raised off the ground. And I have a couple of quotes for her too. She said that this figure that rises up from the land tethers us to non-colonial histories and ideologies, stories quite literally built into the land itself. And you like feel that when you're there. She said, rising above the earth, these structures allow people to look across the landscape, placing them in line with the horizon. Mounds also hold a temporal vantage point, inviting us to see the present through layers of time, looking from the perspective of the ancestors. So for her, it's like when she's standing on the mound, time kind of collapses and you become part of this larger lineage in history. So we're excited to have two of her sculptural installations that reference mounds, but also effigy staffs that are found inside those mounds. So yeah, I think we've kind of covered some of the bases, which is the monumentality, the shape itself, which Haegue called like kind of an object in some ways, almost like an installation in its own right. There's the personal component that we all kind of have our own personal reflections with the mounds. And then of course, this idea of like time and bringing in the ancestors. So I wonder if we might want to bring in our contributors, if anyone has any thoughts about that first question, like what is it about Cahokia or mounds that are near you that kind of, what sticks with you? I have a specific question for Kassie, also just because you're incorporating copper into your pieces, which was found at Cahokia, as you had mentioned. It came from the Great Lakes, I want to say you had said, but yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. For me, the mound, the way I get my creativity from it, it's very grounding. It's the permanence of it. It's how I look at my work as well, because everything I make, I'm making to last. I'm making to think about how someone else is going to utilize that. And they were able to be creative, and they didn't separate the creativity from the land and community. It was all one. It was how they shaped their entire world. And so I view my art the same way, is how the patterns I pick, the designs and the stories I tell, is how is that going to live on way after I'm gone? Because we're still finding their artifacts. And I know like copper will last forever. It's such a raw, natural material. And I think about how my work is going to last. So that's how I draw my creativity, thinking about the mounds.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to?
So I think one of the reasons they stick with people is because they are an art installation in some ways. If you want to look at that from that perspective, that's not exactly what they are either. But I think the kind of energy that people have referred to as they visit. I mean, these are places that are literally charged with our bodies. The bodies of my ancestors are inside of them. And that's one of the things that I think also draws people to that. And it's a very different understanding of how to activate something. But I do like this kind of movement that Haegue did with the moving of these mounds. And I think for me personally, there's a lot of story and other things that and knowledge that go along with this landscape that I wasn't aware of until I came to the mounds. It made more sense to me, stories that I'd heard from different folks in my family, and that landscape became very familiar, and it filled in some blanks on some of the stories that I had made. But I think that's also the reason for that, is that they're simultaneously art installations and muses at the same time. So.
I was going to say we had been talking about different things, and how, as an academic, I knew about place-based knowledge and the effects that it can have on people who have been removed from their place. And I know nothing that I can experience can be the same, but when it hit me emotionally is when I came back from Boston and people were saying, hey, tell me about Faneuil Hall. And I was like, nope, I can't, because all of that was there. So when I go back to Boston, I can remember everything. And so it's important that we recognize that there's different traumas associated with removal, not just like the horrific things that happened during that time, but how that can impact. And I love that Veronica was able to receive that knowledge and to see her culture. And I felt the same way going to Korea, seeing my grandfather's mound, his grave, and feeling that connection.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is leading us actually into our second question, which is just around how the mounds help us to feel part of a larger picture, whether that's nature, the cosmos. What I'm hearing more is like around ancestors and lineage, the stories and the narratives that are that reside there. I just to kind of shake it up a little, I had a couple of more facts to run by you that I thought would help spark the conversation, which I read a couple of books by Timothy, and I don't know how to pronounce his last, Pocketat. And there was this section where he was talking about how in the year 1054, there was this supernova or this guest star that was visible during the day and the nighttime for 23 days. And shortly or right around that time, Cahokia was kind of rebuilt. And so I'm bringing this up because I want to talk a little bit about like this kind of cosmological connection. You had said that we don't know the exact reason of why they were there, but there are examples and, the remains of what seems to be a connection to the cosmos. And I'd love for you to kind of touch on that. And if that, yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that's like the exact date, but I know, it might be the exact date because like in China, they could see it too, and they wrote about it. There's some relationship to, I believe, to Picture Cave in Missouri. And so perhaps that was something that encouraged that exponential growth of people. Maybe here they could see it really good compared to St. Louis. I'm not sure, but definitely these events, would have had an impact. People are, again, I said time immemorial. They're here. They're looking up at the sky. I think Veronica said this to me. There's more cool stuff that's happening at night, and something that is happening during the day and night would have been definitely impactful. I don't know if that answered your question. Does anybody else have ideas?
Or does anyone want to kind of connect, this idea of the larger picture of nature? I know that Rico, you're a horticulturist. You're thinking a lot about native plants. Is there something about the mounds that really connects you to like a larger ecological understanding of the region? Not to put you on the spot, but.
So I am Dene. My people don't actually have much of a foothold in this area. And by much, I mean none at all. If anything, my people one individual or two might have wandered up here and been quickly gotten rid of. But for me, Cahokia, as a Native person living in St. Louis, as you mentioned previously, there's no federally recognized tribes in Missouri, and there's no major cultural sites for Native people to connect and find community with. And so for me, Cahokia is more of a communal space for me to connect with people who do have ancestry to this area and to learn from them how to care properly for this land that I am a guest to. So that is my main connection to Cahokia. I find it familiar and comforting in a place of connection, as I'm sure it used to be historically as well, situated amongst major riverways. So I'm continuing that tradition in learning from the people around me as a pilgrim myself.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm sitting over here and I'm having like a rejection moment in my heart where it's like I want to push back on the idea of mound as an object. Like I respect as an artist. I mean, I'm an earth-based artist. I respect that the work that we have historically made as humans or as Native people kind of enters into the realm of artistry or installation through structure. But I want to be very clear that these are sites of ceremony. These are sites of burial. These are not art installations for the sake of art. These are serving functional purposes. And I think it's good that we think about them not as object, but as place, as not just place even, but perhaps being. I don't think we can think of them as being objects because I can't think of them objectively. I can only think of them subjectively because this is relatives. This is relation. This is not just relatives inside mounds. This is relatives surrounded by relatives, because the cosmology is a relational cosmology. So I'm really thinking through also, like, you know, the idea of like what maybe mystically made people want to be here. I mean, I think the answer is always inside of land. If you're spending time with land, if you're really looking at what is happening with land or with place, there's always going to be places we're drawn to. And that can be for either practical reasons, there's a river, or it can be for spiritual reasons of this is a good place to commune, it feels correct. So I think probably that's what led both of those things, is both a practicality and the like what feels correct spiritually, what feels correct for a society of people, what feels correct for a place where you can build out community and economy, really. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking through, is I can't think of them as object or even as art installation, because it is encompassing a whole worldview that didn't, I think, operate in these separations of industries. I mean, that's a whole way of life. It's not parse and parcel, I guess. Like, so that's what that's what I'm thinking through right now.
Thank you. I'm getting the signal that it's time to transition to Q&A from the audience. If anyone has any, even if it's not a question, if it's like a reflection, or if you want to riff off of what someone has said, want to welcome your thoughts.
Hello. Thank you guys both for sharing and also sharing the video of the piece in movement, which I think is one of the really interesting things about Cahokia and these sites with huge plaza areas is, and I think Angela explained it really well, is that there is activity within these plazas all the time. And I think it's easy to lose that in its current state. But it's interesting to think through, and maybe Angela can speak to this more because we've talked about it a lot as a fellow archaeologist who works in an area with a lot of plazas. But the amount of movement, human movement, that it takes to just make these things. And so thinking of it as, I don't want to use production because I don't want to separate it from the importance, like Lydia was talking about. But just in the creation of these spaces, the amount of movement back and forth that people had to take, because I think it's maybe a little lost to a modern audience of like they're moving by the basketful by hand. Yeah. So yeah, Angela, if you could speak to that and kind of that movement element as well, I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah. So for scale, so Cahokia Mounds, 4,000 acres. The next largest Mississippian site, Moundville, is 400 acres. So this place is significant, it's important, it's special, and you have to want to be there and participate in doing things. So moving 40 acres of earth and flattening it and leveling it and raising it and keeping it clear of debris and other materials and utilizing it specifically. And one of the facts that I don't know if you saw, so Monk's Mound, 100 feet tall, 14-acre base. Some estimates said 300 years. Well, that's the whole life of the site, of people being there doing these things. And then recent research, 2010, 20 to 50 years to build Monk's Mound. Because again, as Lydia was saying, the being part of everything, everyone being communally connected, they want to be here. You have to, walk. There's no horses. The closest beast of burden that would be here in the Americas at the time is in South America. It's the alpaca or llama. So people are doing this labor probably out of love, like they want to be a part of it. And baskets, 40-pound baskets full of soil.
One by one.
Yep, one by one. Or maybe like in a line, like here's a basket, here's a basket. Yeah, assembly line. Yeah. Any other questions? There's somebody back there. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. What did these people do when there was a tornado? Because, they go through there all the time. I mean, heck, just a few miles down the road a couple of years ago, an Amazon building got ripped in half. What did they do? There was no sirens. I just have always wondered that.
Well, I feel like if you're part of the landscape, you've been here for a long time, you're going to recognize the signs, and they probably had a way to do that. I'm from Mascoutah, and I've lived here most of my life, that a brief instance in Oklahoma and Boston, and I don't recall a tornado, though, coming to Cahokia Mounds or ever hitting Mascoutah. There's a more recent one, which could be attributed to climate change with, the timing and everything. But that was still further south. What the site supervisor, Lori Belknap, she's also an archaeologist. I use this all the time now, is we can't excavate intention. So we can't know like those processes, these thought processes and things like that. That's fair.
I just wanted to ask, like you just said with the you can't excavate intention, and there's just so much we don't know about this place and the people who made it. And I was just curious if you could say a little bit about, I know kind of, historically with like Western archaeology, at least, there's a lot of like projecting the colonial imagination on that past, and kind of like just trying to like, I guess, people making up stuff. And I was just curious if you could talk about kind of in like current archaeology at Cahokia Mounds and also with like artists working with Cahokia Mounds, how do you kind of balance that like empty space of things we don't know with the like our contemporary imagination and sort of sorting that out? I don't know if that question makes sense, but
yeah. So I'm Korean. I'm not a descendant. I'm a descendant of other mound building peoples. So maybe there's that affinity. I grew up in this space. But what I try to do as my practice is to talk to descendants, is to hear what they say, what they teach me, and utilize that. And what I also do is just preface everything like we are looking at what was left behind. So these are utilizing a lot of different resources. I don't just use what an archaeologist says. I also look at oral histories. I look at ethnographies. I ask my friends questions and like, why 12 posts, at Woodhenge? Can someone explain that? Or like, what do you feel about this place? So I try to utilize that with permission, just so that we can move away from these older interpretations that, we also have to recognize our biases, right? That we all live our own individual lives and see the world a certain way. And so we have to recognize that the way that I see the world is not the same as what these Mississippians saw it. And it could be something very different.
Can you speak on the contemporary placement of the trees on the land? I understand that like there is some like contemporary curation of the way that the space looks, and it has to honor how it was before, like governmentally, we started playing with the layout of things. But I'm curious, like, I'm sure none of those trees are much older than 80 years or so.
Yeah, so some of these trees are historic or modern. If you're looking in the center and you're like, that looks like a tree-lined road. It was. The state had purchased only part of, which actually is a great photograph, is this section from Twin Mounds to Monk's Mound, 144 acres last year. So we hit 100-year anniversary of the archaeological site being purchased by the state and protected by it. And this year is 100 years since it was open to the public. So people, again, we're humans. We like to move about the landscape. People historically were living there, building their houses on mounds, near mounds, and modifying this landscape the way that they felt they needed and utilized. So Mississippian period, this green grass is actually invasive European grass. Illinois is a prairie state. We don't have any prairie grass on site, although Rico is trying to work on that. So if someone wants to join that cohorts of sorts. And it would have been filled with people, their homes, activities, and the trees probably were not in that way, but probably maintained groves of trees, orchards, and things like that to have those resources available.
Wow, I feel like we only just scratched the surface of this topic. It's a big one, but I want to kind of call it there and say thank you so much, Dr. Cooper, for sharing your knowledge and for our wonderful contributors. I don't know about you all, but I feel just even more grateful and lucky that we live so close to such a special place. So thank you. I have a couple plugs. I'm going to make one plug and then I'm going to open it up to if you have anything you want to share about Cahokia. Okay. So our last activation of Haegue's sculpture is on February 6th. So 8 p.m. Hope you can make it. And yeah, Dr. Cooper.
I have a couple. So next Friday, the 7th, we are having a trivia night and silent auction. All funds raised will benefit Cahokia and Mounds Museum Society, our Friends Group, and the Powell Archaeological Research Center. Both nonprofit groups work to preserve archaeological data and support the preservation of Cahokia Mounds and the surrounding area. We have 11 tables, so we have 3 still available if anyone's interested. It's $150, 8 to 10 seats. It's okay if you don't want to. We've got 11 tables. But it's really fun. The trivia is really hard. The retired former site services specialist 2, William Eisminger, he finds the hardest questions. So your brain will work really hard. And then my second plug is Cahokia Mounds has been doing a lecture series since the 70s, and we've made it virtual since our building is closed. The next one will be Sunday, February 22nd at 1 p.m. It's free, open to the public. You do have to register in order to receive a link and either download the WebEx app for free or just use it on your browser. And you can find that. I've got flyers out, but it's cahokiamounds.org/events, and you can find that posting. And Dr. Eric Singleton, McCaslin Chair of Cowboy Culture and Curator of Native American Art and Ethnology at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, he will be talking about Spiro, another Mississippian site, and it's in Oklahoma. And his presentation is Reinterpretations of Ancient Spiro, the Ritual Realm of the Mississippians. And then the next one and last one is Sunday, March 22nd at 1 p.m. It's Dr. Erin Benson. She's the coordinator of the American Bottom Field Station for the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. And she is going to talk about their work with the community in Brooklyn, Illinois. So hers is entitled Collaborative Archaeology and Community History in Brooklyn, Illinois.
Thanks everyone for being here. Please check out the tables, buy some things, have some food, hang out, and thanks so much for being here.